And welcome to my Jewish Learnings weekly Daf Yomi Week in Review class. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ben Harris. I'm the managing editor at My Jewish Learning. It's sitting in today for Rachel Scheinerman, who is usually in this chair. But I want to welcome you all. We have a very juicy week in Talmud, from what I understand. And we have no one better to help guide us through that than Rabbi Asher Lepatin. And I will just toss it over to you. Rav Asher, thanks for being with us this morning.
Hey, thank you so much, Ben, and good to see everyone from all over the world. I'm going to start with Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph 74a, and Ben, if I get into anything that's a little too raunchy or too sensitive, you'll stop me or something. We'll stop the recording or something like that. But I think our rabbis help guide us, and I imagine this tractate Yevamot, even though it's so technical in so many ways, it deals with sensitive issues of who can marry and how to get married, and love and romance and connection. So we'll see this is a great tranche of Gemara of 7 pages, 7 dapim. So first of all, on 74a, Ayin Dalet Aleph, it talks about, when you do a brit milah, when you do a circumcision, there are tzitzin hama'akvin. If you cut the whole thing, look, I didn't come up with the circumcision ceremony or that kind of thing, so don't blame me for it. God commanded it, so the Jewish tradition has it. That could be a whole long discussion, but it is interesting that I helped with a conversion of someone who actually had an adult who had a circumcision as a baby, a non-Jewish circumcision, but was circumcised. And so the law is that to convert, they just traditionally just need a pinprick, a little bit of blood taken out from that area and near where the circumcision would be or was. But we needed a mohel, an authorized circumciser, to make sure that the original circumcision didn't have these tzitzin hama'akvin, didn't have those little bits of skin that might not have been taken off. So I apologize, I'm not an expert in that and how much skin needs to be taken off or that kind of thing. So luckily, thank God, it all worked out, and he was properly circumcised as a kid. So all they needed was a little pinprick, and he's a wonderful Jew now, and so it's great. So these are really halakha l'maaseh. These are really practical things. I have a dear friend who's an intactivist who is against circumcision. We agree on other issues. We don't agree on this issue, but it's interesting. One of the things that he asked me about is is there a real penalty if a man doesn't have a bris, is not circumcised? And that's on Ayin Dalet we deal with different things that you're not allowed, Pesach and other things that they're not allowed to eat, but only things that really involve temple kind of things. So in the contemporary world, you don't have these technical penalties. Ayin Dalet Amud Bet talks about different, so 74b, about impurity and different levels. And it's just interesting. There's one immersing in a mikvah, which is, let's say, represents a mikvah, a ritual bath, represents rebirth. As Aryeh Kaplan talks about it, coming out of the womb. But then we also have the end of the day, Uvah Hashemesh v'taher. We have the end of the day is another layer of getting you out of an impure situation. Impurity, tuma, let's translate psycho-spiritual trauma, sort of the way Rav Aaron Soloveitchik used to explain it, like a trauma. So you have the rebirth ceremony, you have the end of the day, and it's a new day. And then other things require even a sacrifice to get out of. So different levels. And also on 75a, I like this kind of negia netilat neshama leka, that if you just touch something when you're tameh and something's holy, You don't get the real zap. You don't get Natilat Neshama. You don't get the death penalty. Death penalty is more like you walk into the temple when you're impure. So those of you who go up onto the Har Habayit on the Temple Mount, just be careful. But just touching is not a big issue. Interestingly, it deals with these are kind of sensitive, I guess men are on the hot. Well, no, men and women are going to be on the hot seat in this in these pages, these doping. But if you have to remove a testicle, people with testicular cancer sometimes have to remove a testicle. So the ruling is you're okay. It's okay. It's not like there are issues of Bitsua Daka, of prohibitions if the testicles are mangled. But when the rabbis are kind of trying to be very lenient about this, and also on 75b, and we don't have to get into these details, exactly where is this injury to the testicles, but I do want to point out one thing that I think is very important on 75b, and it really goes across the Talmud. And this is something you can, discuss on your, when we have more time. The use of this language, Shmuel used this language of Petzua Daka be'oto makom. So he says, this injured testicle stuff or whatever, but otomakom, in that place. So it's interesting that the Talmud does use euphemisms. And I know there's a sort of a discussion in different circles that, should we say the name of the organ, say their name, say the name of the organ, or should we use euphemisms like that place? And I don't know. I'm kind of maybe I'm old school. I'm a baby boomer born in 1964. So I like the idea of using euphemisms because sometimes it could be either triggering or offensive or make people uncomfortable when you use the names of the organs. So that's sort of the direction of the Talmud, but other people feel differently. Ben, I was telling you in our couple of minutes beforehand that this is a racy Gemara. And so on 76a, the rabbis want to find out whether an injury to the male organ, makes them invalid to get married and not able to shoot seed. So they have to sort of, how do you get men excited? And so Yilamdenu Rabbeinu Hechi Avdina, and let Rabbi tell us how do you get a man to get an erection and whatever. So this is very important because this is actually sometimes it's done for medical testing and to see how people can give birth or to collect seed. So you can have a test tube baby or artificial insemination. So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein brought up some of these interesting solutions that the Gemara has. So one of them is warm bread, and that will stimulate. And that's a little bit too much for the Talmud. Come on, that's a little too much stimulus. So, okay, look, this is the Talmud. It's all bets are off. So that's a little too much. That's Atu Kolomel Yaakov Avinu Havai. That's what Yaakov Avinu, who never had an erection until he, had actual relations with Rachel and Leah. He would need like a warm bread to get things going. But Ben, you're monitoring this, right? So make sure I'm staying, in the my Jewish learning guidelines.
You're doing great, Asher, but I will just say there's a discussion in the chat that maybe at some point before we conclude you'll just address is how we got on this subject to begin with.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, we got on the subject, I'll say, because the Mishnah was talking about Mishnah way back in 70, different people that can a karut shofcha, ptsua daka and karut shofcha. These are people that have injuries to the male organ. Can they eat in truma? Can they get? And there's an issue of them not being able to get married. The Torah talks about that. So we got to diagnose this and see if one of the ways of diagnosing this is seeing whether the person can actually shoot a stream of seed. So that's sort of really get to it, and so. Okay, so the other solution is colored clothes. Show the person colored clothes, and that will stimulate the man. But this gets laughed out of the Beit Midrash. It says, "Ati kulama kule alma kabarzilai hagiladi." Is everyone now? Barzilai Hagiladi lived in the days of King David, and he was known as a very lustful person, a good man, but very lustful. So he would see a little bit of colored clothing, and he would run off, and then that would stimulate him. So the rabbis are kind of trying to find a middle ground between how to do this. Now, just in case you thought that the men were getting all the attention here, so on the women also get attention in Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, this 76a, and maybe you can go back and revisit this page. So Nashi Masolalo, this is like a big issue. This is in the middle, right before the Mishnah. Rab Huna is very strict about, at least according to Rashi, this seems to be about same-sex relations between women. So a little different between the Tosfot and Rashi, two great commentaries on the Talmud. But the interesting thing is that the conclusion of the Gemara is that it does not, a woman who is engaged in lesbianism, let's take Rashi's explanation, is not invalid, is not prohibited to a Kohen, as Rav Huna says, Pritsuta be'alma. It's just there's a negative association with this. Some rabbis say that this is talking about lesbian relationships. That's either when a woman is already married to a man and she has a side lesbian relationship, or certainly relationships that are not associated with marriage or with family life together, a one woman with another woman. So a lot to say about this, but pritsuta be'alma is really a very interesting two words. Pritsus means looseness. Be'alma means, just stam, looseness. So something really interesting to look at. And I would argue very much, personally that that's the difference between a monogamous lesbian relationship that would not be pritsuta ba'alma, and again, a relationship where a woman is married to a man and has a side affair with another woman. So anyway, that we can talk about that at another time. But just when we're done with that, then we get into a really exciting point of the classic discussion of Ammoni and Moavi, that an Ammonite and a Moabite cannot marry amongst the Jewish people. This is because they were not generous giving food as we went through the wilderness. The idea of helping refugees and helping. We were kind of a refugee people, I guess, until we got into Israel, into the Holy Land. So they were not generous. It's an incredible story of really characters in the Bible that you would never associate with this. So Avner ben Ner in the Bible, in the book of Shmuel, is a Shmuel Aleph. It is a general of Saul. Here he is. First of all, they're all Talmidei Chachamim. They're all rabbis and scholars. That's everyone's a rabbi they say give a hammer sees everything as a nail, something like that. So, rabbis in the Talmud see everything as Talmudic scholars. So you have Avner ben Ner, who was on Saul's side against David, but David loved him. And then you have Doeg HaAdomi. This is the nastiest, vicious, one of the worst villains of the Bible, who wipes out the city of Nov, the priestly city of Nov. We'll get to that a little bit later. He is the head of the Beit Din, and he is arguing that David is not worthy of being king, because, or even coming into the royal family, because of Ruth. Coming up in 2 weeks, right? We're going to read the book of Ruth for Shavuot. So Ruth was a Moabite, and so this is where the argument is given. How can King David marry anybody, let alone be part of the royal family? And Avner ben Ner says, Amarle Avner Tanina, which kind of normally means we learned in a Mishnah, but this is a little bit before the Mishnaic period, like 1,000 years, so, or 1,500 years. So he says, Tanina, Ammoni velo Ammoni, Moavi velo Moavi. This is the classic thing, that a male Moabite, cannot marry a Jewish woman, but a female Moabite can marry a Jewish man. So then Doeg asks all these questions. So Doeg is the villain here, but he's a villain as a chief justice, kind of, thinking of Supreme, we respect all of our judges in America, but you can see the damage that a judge can do that is just as bad as anyone else can do. So Doeg asks all these questions, and finally, Amasa, who is the general that King David brings in, and ultimately Yoav kills. He's another character in the David story as a general, but here he's another Talmid Chacham, but he's kind of in the middle. He says, he takes his sword and says, whoever doesn't listen, this is on 77a, whoever doesn't listen to the halacha that a female Ammonite and Moabite can marry a Jew, I'm going to kill. So, okay, that's that kind of, I guess that ends that discussion. But another, as we come up on Ein Zayin 77a, towards B, there's a real struggle in the Gemara to not be so exclusive. So we saw it a little bit with someone whose male organ is damaged. Can they get married? Trying to enable them to get married. We see it with a Moabite woman and an Ammonite woman being able to get married. On 77a, it says, Bat Ger Ammoni Kshera L'Kahuna, a daughter of an Ammonite who converts is allowed to, it's an Ammonite, a male Ammoni who converts, and he has a daughter, she can marry a Kohen. So a convert normally, it's a discussion, but is not normally allowed to marry a Kohen in traditional understandings. But an Ammonite, but this woman who's a daughter of an Ammonite is allowed to marry a Kohen. And then it says also, Ger Shenasa Gioret, a convert who marries another convert, their daughter can marry a Kohen. So really, this is very contemporary, actually. Whether you're worried about marrying a Kohen or all that kind of things, it's how are converts treated, and how do we welcome them into this community and fully integrate them into the community. And Israel has challenges. Oh my gosh, that's a whole other discussion. That's probably the JTA side of my Jewish learning. But how do we bring in people that we want to convert? How do we welcome them? How do we deal with converts who look differently than white Ashkenazim? So from Ethiopia, from Africa. So the rabbi saying that a daughter of convert can marry a Kohen is like a stamp of approval that we really welcome these people who have Jews by choice to the highest echelons of society. There is on Okay. Here we get to other really interesting thing. Um, on 77B and 78A. Oh my God, mom's there. So we had issues with, someone whose male organs was injured, or someone who didn't circumcise themselves. Now we get a question of a mom's there. Mom's there is someone who is an offspring of an illegal marriage, of an illicit marriage. Not someone, not outside of marriage, but one of the prohibited relationships, God forbid, a father and a daughter, something like that. So the offspring of that, or a married woman and a man, and so what do you do for a mamzer? So there's a lot of discussion about this in Europe, how they did it. Some of the ways of doing it is just like sending them to another city. Just don't tell anybody. Stuff doesn't always work well, like, just sending them off and don't tell. But for moms there, it really seems that the rabbis in our tradition feel so bad for this person. It's not their fault at all. Now, a mamzer is allowed to marry a convert. But the problem is, and that's lovely, so they're, but the problem is, their offspring, if a mamzer marries a convert, or a mamzeret marries a convert, the offspring remains a mamzer. So it allows them to lead a life. They don't have to be alone. And anyone, that would be so sad if someone wants to be in companionship is not allowed to. So no, there's no prohibition about that. They just have to choose the partner, the right partner. But what do you do about the child? So Rav Moshe Feinstein, who was a 20th century, the greatest decider of the 20th century in America, certainly, had followed the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon, to how do you solve this problem? So it's kind of a little bit, even when I heard this, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, it was a little bit uncomfortable, but it seems to work. So the mamzer marries a shifcha, marries a woman who becomes his, I guess, a non-Jewish woman who he buys or something to become a shifcha, a slave, let's say. I don't know, this may be anyway, we're getting into fantasies and all sorts of things here, but in any case, he marries her, and he's allowed to have relations with a shifcha, with a bondswoman, let's say, to use nicer language. Their kids are not mamzerim. Their kids are slaves. I mean, to have your kids as slaves, I don't know if the kids will listen to you anymore if they're slaves or whatever. But what you got to do is, so you marry a non-Jewish woman who you make your shifcha, and you have lots of kids, and then boom, you redeem your wife, and she becomes a full citizen, a Jew, a Gioret. And all the kids, if you want, you redeem them. They become free people. And then they can marry, I don't know if they can marry Kohani, but anyway, they can get married and everything's good. So that's sort of a way of, like, the rabbis were really stretching, really felt bad for this. And even Reish Lakish wanted to say that a mamzeret, that 10 generations, just like some other people, after 10 generations, we let them in. Likewise, maybe a mamzer. The ruling is sort of against that, unfortunately. Okay, so I see we have 5 minutes, and this is a horrific, on 78B, just a horrific, sad story. Oh my gosh. So it starts with Saul, Doeg, that Dracop, that person who tried to declare that King David could not marry because of Ruth. So he wiped out, I mentioned before, a city of Nov because they gave refuge to David when he was running away from Saul. And years later, when David was, so Rav Moshe, I see just a quick, Rav Moshe Feinstein says it works. says do it. I don't know all the details, but Ramosha Feinstein says this is a solution for a mamzer to get married and have kids and to break the cycle of mamzerut. So at some point in David's life, there's a terrible drought and they don't know what to do about it. So they ask the Urim V'Tumim. They go to the high priest and the high priest says, you got a problem here because when Doeg wiped out the city of Nov, the Givonim, who are Netinim, or people that converted falsely to Judaism in the time of Joshua, but also in the time of David, in the time of Moshe. There's a whole discussion of that on 79. But these people were robbed of their income because they used to supply food and water to the people of Nov. And once you wiped out the city of Nov, they lost their income. So you got to appease the Givonim, who are called Netinim. And so David says, okay, I'll go appease them because they were wronged. And they say we want to kill all the offspring of Saul. That's the way to do it. So he does. They hang them all. It's terrible. Oh my gosh. And the rabbis say, how could you do this? And they say, well, you're punishing the kids of Saul for what Saul did. And so they say, Mutav sh'te'aker ot achat min Torah. Better that we basically violate the Torah. V'al yitchalel shem shamayim barabim. And may the name of God not be defiled publicly. Meaning, the way we treat non-Jews, and this comes up in other contexts also, can be a real chil Hashem, a real desecration of God's name. So they, very sad. It does rain, but they felt so angry at these Netinim, the Givonim, that they demanded this horrific punishment of Saul's kids, that they prohibited marrying them and they made them water carriers and all that. So this is sort of the, really kind of efforts that the rabbis made to be inclusive of some people, like mamzerim, like sensitive to some people, and really enable people that have injuries to their organs to really be able to live a married life. But other people, Netinim, who are they're so angry at that they go in the other direction, that they prohibit them. On Ayin Tet Amud Bet, so 79. It's also interesting, 79a, just this history of Moshe and Yoshua and David. They're all kind of encountering these people that kind of fool them, that want to become Jewish. But I think the idea is that if people want to become Jewish and they act in a beautiful way, that's great. And this is a case where tragically they acted in a horrific way, and they caused the death of wonderful people. So they kind of answer, Yoshua made them prohibited in the time when the temple's standing. King David, in his additional prohibition, says it lasts forever. I don't know who the Netinim are these days. No one knows who these people are these days. The rabbis say that Sancheriv came and mixed up the whole world. On 80A, which is today, you'll learn about a saris, someone who has no hair after 20 years, and also issues of getting married, not being able to be having kids. And so there's a whole issue. So we're getting into these are kind of sensitive areas, I think, that the rabbis are really struggling with some very strict Torah laws and sort of trying to find their way around them and trying to minimize their impact really as much as possible. So they kind of get very technical and very physical in exploration to try to minimize the issues. Ben, it's 10 o'clock and we're good.
Thank you, Rabbi Lopatin. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Appreciate this tour through the week in Daf Yomi. We'll be back next week. I hope to see you then, too. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye bye. Thank you. Yasher Koach.